Hey there, welcome back to another episode in our recorded community event series. I'm Racine Malcolm, Community Manager here at Zitadel, and today you'll be watching a deep dive on Zitadel V3, our new quarterly release process, and how all of our latest announcements around V3 impact you as a user. As always, before we dive in, don't forget to subscribe to our channel, give this video a like, and join our community for more events like this.
So we decided to switch to a 3-monthly release cycle. Previously, this was a 2-week cycle, so we had 2-week sprints and then we do a release. We have various reasons for that. Most of it is actually explained in this discussion on GitHub, which will be linked in the chat. So basically, the goal why we switched to a 3-month release cycle, like we want to have a high quality product, easy operation, lower maintenance overhead for us, easier velocity. So easy operation basically means less versions, means also less upgrades. We got a lot of feedback from customers and community members that, maybe every 2 releases we had some big migration happening, and people that do want to keep up with the latest version, like also for security patches and stuff like that, they often find themselves stuck in long running migrations and whatnot. With a longer release cycle, we can all batch that. So if we release every 3 months, then you'll just have to bite the bullets every 3 months, basically. Low maintenance, it's our benefit. Less releases also means less versions to maintain. For our enterprise customers, we typically stipulate like 180 days of maintenance. With a 2-weekly release cycle, that basically means we have to maintain 13 versions. This is now basically reduced to just 2 major versions. So this is a graphic overview where we're switching. So the versions here are not aligned. So basically, when I'm talking here about Q1, it's a relative timeline towards the version, right? So just a quick image of what I'm working towards in this presentation. So just about versioning, resource APIs have the independent version. We are currently developing a V2 API. We already have V1. We are developing V2 as a resource API. In that API, we follow semantic versioning, right? So if there would ever be breaking change, then we'll migrate that API to a V3. So that means that is our frontline for semantic versioning. Semantic versioning doesn't apply as much to the Zitadel binary, right? So we decided that we'll switch to major releases every 3 months. Up to now, you've seen every release was basically a minor release inside V2, but now we'll just do major releases. But it doesn't mean that the API will break. But it might be that something in the configuration break or in, like in how you run Zitadel. More about that also in the presentation of Fabienne, like we dropped cockroach support with the coming version. We still can backport like simple features, right? If it doesn't have too many conflicts, or if it's easy for us, or if we, for example, if we would release V4 and if V4 we have a small feature that we want in V3, we would still backport that if it's backportable, right? If it doesn't depend on a lot of internal mechanics and stuff like that. Bucket security fixes are backported and create patch releases. But yeah, major release may include refactorings. We can restrict upgrade paths. So maybe we can ask people, be sure that you have this version before you switch to the next version. At the moment, it's kind of arbitrary. Right? You can skip 10 Zitadel versions and we have to support all those upgrade paths, which is also sometimes the burden and can result in unexpected bugs. Yeah, so we can compact and remove unneeded migrations and just say, hey, listen, in order to upgrade to V4, be sure that you're first at the end by the means of V3 and then make the bump to V4, and we can kind of clean up our migration code. This is also a bit like internal information, but we have the first quarter of a version is basically our preparation phase. In this time, our product manager, Fabi, he establishes like feature priorities based on what we get from community customers. Our specialists, so we have, people that have topics under their root, that these are engineers basically might set like technical depth priorities. We need to respect or optimize code or et cetera, et cetera. So basically, Q1 is preparation and planning. Architects So everybody is involved there in the planning. The second quarter of that version, we are doing the implementation. Everything goes into main, features, fixes, refactorings. We try to keep main kind of unbroken by continuous QA. So we have pipelines, actions, and whatnot, integration tests. But, these are not versions that we release to the community. We do some builds for internal purposes. Then when the Q2 is finished, we end up in Q3, obviously. The first month of Q3, we stabilize the version. So we do a release candidate. This is basically where we are now with V3. Right? So we released V3 the 1st of April. We publish this to the community. So you can actually start using the latest features of Zitadel, test them out. Maybe our community members have some dev environment that they use for themselves. And this can give us a lot of valuable feedback in potential bugs that leaked in. And the goal is to solve those bugs before we can release the stable version. So, and after that, general availability for the remainder of Q3. That is the moment we will deploy the version to Zitadel Cloud. This is also the moment that community members may be running some sort of production could upgrade if they want. In this period, as I mentioned, we can still backport features from the next cycle. So if V3 stable, we might still backport features from V4 and do some minor releases. And obviously the bug and security fixes, they go on. The fourth quarter, this is basically maintenance only of that version. So we would only backport bug and security fixes. That also provides a bit of overlap for everybody to go to the next version. And then basically we have deprecation. So that is kind of, Q5-ish, but principle, we just want to say version this for 1 year and then it's that. But we do have some requirements maybe from enterprise customers that just need that little bit of extra overlap in order to upgrade. They may be lagging. They might not need the latest, so they might be like a bit more reluctant to do upgrades and be a bit later in the process. If there are enterprise customers and there are special requirements, we would still backport security fixes as long as we can and as long as it's needed, but we cannot guarantee that at that point. So yeah, these are basically more visualization of the update paths. Beta testers, Citadel Cloud, self versus enterprise. The visualization of the backports, features, bug fixes, security. And here in this stage, just bug fixes, security. And then finally in deprecation, we are doing the security fixes. Yeah, we hope that we can make everything, let's say, a bit more efficient, that we can keep our timelines. And we basically deliver a more stable product in the future with some extended period of support need for enterprise. As I said, there's more details in the GitHub discussion. And there you can also respond if you have other ideas. We are still evaluating at the moment. So we might still, change it in the future based on feedback, internal or external. Yeah, that's on that subject.
Great. Thanks, Tim. So yeah, today we are talking about the new Citadel version 3. So we had a couple of features in there. One thing is the license change that we did, then the cockroach DB support that we have removed, Actions V2, the web keys management, user invite flow. I will just go briefly over the license change because we already have a blog post about that, and our last community event has been about only this topic, but I still want to mention 2 to 3 points for those who were not aware. So we recently changed with the new version of Citadel from an Apache to HEPR3 licensing model. Basically, why we did this is that modifications must be shared by the community. So we want to kind of force the community contributions. Then the second point is that we think that this license change also gives back to the organizations who benefit from Citadel can also contribute back to its open development. So whenever you do something with Citadel, you can give back on what you did. And last, why we decided for HEPL was that we wanted to stay open source and in our opinion, GPL is one of those licenses who still does that. Just also briefly what this means for you. Generally for you end users, there's not really a change. If you're just using Zitadel as an identity platform, there should not be a big change. For contributors, there was a short discussion about how we want to handle that. So we decided now that contributions will be done under an Apache 2 license, so we can use those features afterwards. For service providers, when any modifications will be done on the Zitadel code, those need to be shared as well under an GPL 3 license. And the last part, which is the most important for developers, I would say, is that for those, mostly there should not be a big change because we still keep the SDKs and the libraries and the APIs in a Apache 2 license. So you should be still able to use those without any limitations. But it may be important here to mention from our side, in regards of that license change, we can't really give you any legal advices. So whenever you are unsure about how or why impact that or what effect it has on you, we advise you to ask your legal. And other than that, we do also have a commercial license. So if you think, no, I can't rely anymore on the open source part, you can always reach out to us and we will find a solution with our commercial license. If you want to know more about this, head over to our blog and you can read up all the details. Also, there's a GitHub discussion already. If you have any questions, I would ask you to ask them there. So one of the biggest changes with Zitadel V3 is that we have removed the CockroachDB support. So initially, when we started with Zitadel, we only had CockroachDB support in there. Later on, we started also introducing Postgres. So why did we remove that now? For us, we identified that there was quite a maintenance burden from our side. We had to maintain two different databases, and they were not fully aligned all the time. So one thing is definitely that you need to make sure that you test both different databases. In our cloud, we only use Postgres. So we knew that there everything should work, but besides, we always had to test again also against CockroachDB, and made it more difficult from our side. And then the second important part on there is that CockroachDB wasn't fully Postgres compliant. So some features that we started using were differently built in Cockroach, or we had to change or add additional code to make them happen. And also we started using some libraries like River, which were only supported for Postgres, which made it hard in Cockroach. Again, it would make our life really hard. We would need to implement custom code or workarounds to make that happen. So that's why we decided to remove the CockroachDB support. From our perspective, this gives us some more time to actually improve Zitadel so we can focus more on optimized performance. We only have to test that performance aspect with Postgres, and we already see great improvements on that side. On the other hand, it was always hard to get the same impact as well with Cockroach. Also, it gives us more possibilities to provide, I would say, Postgres-specific features which were not included in the Cockroach database. And it will for sure also simplify our code base and hopefully reduce potential bugs as we don't have to maintain two different database supports. But it's important for you. So we have published a migration path. So how can you migrate from Cockroach to Postgres? You can find that guide and follow the specific steps you have to take to move over from Cockroach. If you have any questions or see some problems with that migration, please reach out to us and we try to help wherever we can and want to help you. We have already tested, we have customers who have already migrated, so we should be able to help you on that move. Second thing, which is also important from your side, is we will keep Cockroach support in the older versions. So everything that is Zitadel version 2 will still have Cockroach support. So there's no need to hurry to upgrade to Postgres, but once you want to migrate or you want to upgrade to Citadel version 3, you will need to move to the Postgres database first. As Tim before mentioned, with our new release cycle, this means that the support for Citadel version at the moment 271 will continue till September 30th. So till end of September, you will have no problems. That should be the point where you migrate to Postgres latest. Next feature we have introduced or at least completed in its basic functionality is Actions V2. So maybe quickly, what is Actions? We've already had Actions V1, and now we call them Actions V2, or basically it's just the next version of it. Actions is kind of our way of giving you all the flexibility on customization and being able to customize workflows that we have in Citadel to your needs to implement your custom use cases. Why we have introduced a new version. So Actions V1 was first test on figuring out how can we help you customize those workflows in Citadel and what is the best approach. At that point, the Actions V1 is kind of a JavaScript snippet you can run directly in Citadel. You can apply it to different flows. For now, only on login and register specific flows through our UI mostly, through our hosted login. So we wanted to add some more flexibility, basically give you more advanced possibilities, not only on specific functions, but also being able to hook into API requests and responses, hook into events, as Citadel is an event-sourced or event-based system. We wanted to give you the opportunity to hook into each event and trigger something and also extend those functions. At the moment, as I said, they are only on those specific login and register flows, but also now we want to give you the possibility to maybe add some more functions whenever they are needed. The second part, we wanted to improve the stability of Citadel. Basically, because we always run the code within Citadel, this put a lot of risks on our side. So we wanted to offload some of the code execution to the customer side. This should reduce the load or the processing load on the Citadel side, as well as reduce potential bottlenecks, as we can't tell how long those actions will run that you have introduced in Citadel, those JavaScript snippets, and they can lead to some bottlenecks. Then the next part is the reliability. So we want to avoid that you have any faulty or error-prone code in Citadel that runs and does or could impact the core functionalities of Citadel. So that's why we moved it also to the customer side. This also gives you, on the other hand, greater control, which means when you run the code on your side, you know what happens, you know where you can run it, and also it gives you some possibility to debug it a little bit easier. That was till now pretty hard, especially in the Citadel Cloud, because the code run on our side. You had certain possibilities to lock or add a logger, but that was only possible with self-hosting, as the logs in Citadel Cloud remain on our side and you didn't have any insights about those. So now you can actually run the code on your side. You see when it triggers, and you also can debug what happens there. This should help you also troubleshoot in case there's anything going wrong with the action or code doesn't work as expected. This should allow you to simplify the troubleshooting. So what does this mean to you? At the moment, Actions V1 is still in GA, so there's no need to rush over to Actions V2. Of course, the functionality in Actions V1 is still limited to those functions that we currently have in the login and in the register flows, and we will not further extend the Actions V1 possibilities. Actions V2 is now in a beta state, but we highly encourage you to already test those out, especially the ones that you don't currently have in the version 1, like adding requests on the, or adding actions on the requests, API requests, or on the events, to test those more advanced customization possibilities. We also provide some migration paths, so we have a list of all the current actions or flows and triggers that we have implemented in version 1 and show you how you can move those over to the actions V2, or what kind of action you will need to add to make them happen again. What is probably also important here to mention, we have published also a new login for our Citadel login V2, our new hosted login, which is not yet available for everyone, or also in beta. If you want to use all the action functionality in the new login, you will also need to use the V2 version, because the old ones were specific in the login or hosted login that we had in the past. Generally, input and feedback is welcome. We would love to see that you test them and give us feedback, what is needed, how would we need to enhance those, and maybe also send us your use cases so we can see what kind of functionalities we should build next. To give you also a little bit outlook about where we want to head with those actions. Basically, next step is collect your feedback on how to improve the feature. Then for the future, we definitely also want to start building kind of an actions marketplace where community and customers can share their actions, and you can maybe download them or use them again. And also from our side, we want to provide some templates for common use cases we see or for common integration. This can be, for example, I want to provision a user from Citadel to my Entra ID, and that flow always looks the same. How would that look like? How could I use that template? So that we get here also into the community-driven approach where we can share what we can do with those new actions. And with that, I give over to Tim for the demo of the actions.
Yeah, so the new actions are basically webhook based. The idea is that we can define targets. Targets are basically the remote service where the webhook is sent. So that could be your AWS Lambda service, or it could be just a Go container running somewhere that are handling those webhooks. For the sake of this presentation, I'm using webhook.site. And so the actual webhook request will be just sent here, and we'll see it here in the right side of my screen. I need to copy this URL. I'm just going to create the target. So I'm just gonna call this WH endpoint. This is going to be a REST webhook. I'm leaving interrupt and error off, because if this is on and the request fail, then the actual API request that it was hooked up to would also fail. Right? So usually you want to not interrupt an error when you're developing, and then maybe when you're sure that your webhooks are running smooth, you can set interrupt an error to true. And that means that your API request will fail if the webhook would fail. Target. Now I'm going to define an action. What I want to do, I want to set a request. I want to forward the request that was sent to Zitadel, basically. We have the option to forward all requests that are made to the Zitadel API. We can say we want all the requests to a particular service, which is all our gRPC services that we have defined. For any gRPC request that will enter on such service would be forwarded to the webhook. Finally, you can also just select a single method. In this case, I am going to use user v2 at your user. It's easy to demonstrate. I see you here to ask me basically the targets that I previously have defined. And now it's set up. So if I go back to the organization and I'll create a user, create a user, and then there it is. Yep. So now I got the request here, webhook site, get the methods, the SSID, org ID, so we get all the details of the request, including the payload for the user. Feature flags, point. So in order to get the new actions, you need to start. So you need to enable the action feature flag. And if you want to create a user in the console, as Fabienne mentioned, also switch on the user flag, feature flag. And then you should have those functionalities.
So maybe as a quick heads up, so in the current release candidate, there is already the UI integrated, also the basic functionality. We have now decided that we already removed the feature flag in the new, or when we make the version completely available, because you should also be able to test those in parallel. So no need to enable that once we release the next version. Also, there will be slight changes in the UI, in the console, just to make it a little bit nicer for you to use. Next feature is the web keys management in console. So basically, this is not a completely new feature. We have already added that some time ago, the web keys management, but now we also added it in the console. For those who were not aware of this whole new feature, I still want to introduce why we did this. So basically, we saw some problems from lots of customers, or lots of customers have complained about the old way on how we did the keys handling. So basically, what we did in the past was we generated the keys when they were used. So basically, once a token was created, we generated the first key, and then you got them on the OIDC keys endpoint. But there were some clients who had troubles with that. So basically, they wanted to get the keys before the first key was created and the list was empty. And this led to a lot of problems. So what we did now is basically change that whole process of how those keys are created. So once you change to the newest web keys management feature, there will just right away a key be created. And after that, you have full responsibility over how those are handled. You can manually rotate, you can manually create a new key, you can delete an old key. And so basically the whole key rotation and everything is up on your side. What does that mean to you? If you already want to test or you face the problems that I stated before, I would encourage to switch over to the new feature flag for the web keys management, and then you will have the new functionality right away. If you're not interested in testing that new feature, you can also leave it as is and you will still have the old handling. With the next version or the next release, so basically Zitadel version 4, we will deprecate the old key handling and make this available for every customer. So in case you don't want to test it before, there is not really an action needed. You will get this feature automatically in the future. Tim can quickly show this feature as well.
Yes. I'm now on a different instance because I actually first want to quickly show when the feature is enabled. I never ever enabled this feature yet on this particular instance. In this step, I call the keys endpoint. At the moment, there's one public key available. So these keys are usually distributed to the OIDC clients that do GWT validation, right? So they need this public key. So they will call the keys endpoint. So basically, what will happen once we will enable the web keys feature, and Zitadel will create two keys for you. In the instance settings, you can go to OIDC web keys. You can see now that two keys are generated. So two key pairs, I must say, of course, because the private key space with Zitadel for signing publicly is distributed. The first one will be activated. So this key will be used for signing. And basically we have a next one available already. Now, if we look to the keys endpoint again, you see three keys. One is basically the legacy key from before you enable the feature flag that will stay there in the response until it expires. As Fabienne explained, the old implementation, those keys would expire after a while. We chose to keep it here until it expires, so that the moment you enable the feature flag, you don't cripple your infrastructure because suddenly the public key is missing. So your infrastructure has some time to discover the new keys and gradually switch over. And then finally, one key will disappear. You'll remain with just the 2 web keys that are basically in this list. The idea is that you have one active and you'd always want to have one basically prepared so that it's already picked up by your infrastructure. And by the moment you choose to roll over to the next key, you can activate the next web key. A small warning about caching might be that the web keys are cached. We set some cache headers. And now the next key is basically active, and the previous key just stays around so that tokens can still be validated until you choose to remove that key. We have one small bug that the actual remove button it's gone here, but on the API you can remove it. We'll fix that before the stable release, but now you should be able to delete this key and then it would disappear from the keys endpoint. Another thing that this feature brings is you can now configure the algorithm you want to use for the key. RSA is the default. Basically, RSA with 248 bits and the SHA-256 hash is the default. This is the most accepted configuration in the industry. Right? If you change the hash there, that's all good and dandy. I know that our Go OIDC library supports any algorithm you can put in here, but there might be some client libraries that don't support all configurations. So, we support other algorithms, but you have to make sure that all your client libraries also support the algorithms you selected. Otherwise, tokens won't be validated anymore. And actually, your access token validation in your code flow would break in that moment. I must say ID token validation. So yeah, you can just select a different key type. So here I use ECDSA and let the pair and select the pair, create that one, and it will pop up here and next in queue. Right, I can by ED 25519. Basically, I can create multiple keys. That's all fine. On the keys endpoint, they will just all show up and they're available. Yeah, that's basically how that works. Things I currently have in mind for the future, but not very well defined yet, is auto rotation. At the moment, if you want auto rotation, you'll probably need to set something up like Terraform on top of the web key resource and have some kind of cron job, or maybe just a cron job that calls curl and does this rotation logic. The documentation actually has some examples on how you can do rotation with simple curl commands. It would be nice in the future that we maybe add some cron type of logic to Zitadel. We use now River queue also for our notification handling, and actually that queuing system also allows for cron jobs to be defined. So I don't know, maybe in the future we can allow something like that. Another thing that I've seen in feedback is maybe the possibility to select a certain signing key for a certain project or application, so that you can say, I have some legacy application that only supports RSA, and I have a more modern application that would accept, for example. And yeah, we could think about, moving that up to a project level configuration, but not very well defined yet. But any feedback on those topics are always welcome. Is that me?
Okay, so we are already coming to one of the last features, the user invite flow. So basically, Tim already showed kind of how that looks like in the console before, when he switched over from the console using our old APIs to our new APIs. So basically, why we introduced this new user invite flow is that you can set up users in advance. So at the moment, when you create a new user, either through our console or through our APIs, V1 APIs, you will always automatically get an invite code for that user. So basically, you enter the email address, first name, last name, and then they will get an email to verify the email address as well as enter a password. We wanted to give you some more possibilities on that flow. So basically, if you, for example, have a new employee joining in a month, but you already know that you can set up the user, but you don't want to send an email right away because the user wouldn't see it yet. But you can already configure all the permissions and all the authorizations the user has in advance. And once they join, you can send out the email so they can set up their authentication methods. Second possibility also that we wanted to provide is basically adding more authentication possibilities. So far, when you do that whole creation flow with the invite user flow, the user will get redirected to our hosted login, be able to add a password and then authenticate it. But there's no possibility to set up a passkey right away or also connecting an existing IDP such as an Entra ID login or Google or whatever you need. So we wanted to extend that possibility as well here. Important notes are here that this is only introduced in the new API. So we have a V1 API where we slowly start migrating, or we are currently heavily working on migrating everything to the V2 API. With that invite flow is only enabled in the new API. So we change kind of how user creation works a little bit in our V2 API. An important point there is also we got rid of the initial state. So basically, in the past, we always created a user in initial state whenever they didn't have a verified email address or a password set. Because there are more authentication possibilities, and also maybe you don't want to verify the email address, we don't want to assume anymore what an initial state for you looks like. So a user is created as active, and then it's up on you to decide what kind of attributes the user needs or which ones they don't need. So we don't want to compute that state anymore for you. So once you switch over to the new API, that initial state will be gone. So that's kind of I would say, breaking behavioral change that you should keep in mind when you switch over. That's also why we put that migration in the console to use V2 API instead of V1 API behind a feature flag. So you can decide when you want to switch over to that new mechanism. The second part is when you now only switch the console UI or use the new resource API version 2 of Zitadel. When you only switch that part, you will get that invite user flow where you have the different possibilities on how to create a user if you want to send an email right away or not. But you will not have the possibility to already add, or the end user will not have the possibility to decide if they want to add password, passkey, or SSO like Google or Apple or whatever account to link there. That's only possible once you also switch to the new login version we have. So we've already had a community event about this topic, the new login V2 that we provide. It's a new hosted login. We will switch over to that one in the future. For now, we have still integrated the current login, but you can already start using the new login, give us feedback and test everything. There's also a feature flag for that in the console where you can decide if you want to use the new login. We have a full migration path on that as well. So if you want to give users more possibilities on the authentication method they can add to the account, then you would also need to switch over to the new login version. We don't have full feature demo about this, but basically this is how the new screen looks like. There's different possibilities now. You will still have to provide the email address, username, given name, and family name. You can still decide if you want the email address to directly be added as verified or not. And then you have different options. Either you can set up the user and tell Zitadel authentication will be added later on. So this is kind of the use case where you add a new employee now who joins in a month and you just want to prepare everything in advance. The second point, you can tell that you want to send the invite or an invitation email so the user can set up their authentication methods. So basically, when you enable that one, the user will get the email. They have a button in there. When they click the button, they will be redirected to Zitadel again to set up either password, passkey, or SSO based on the configuration you have on your organization or the user's organization. And the last step is, which is probably also for support cases or something like that, where a user calls you and you want to set up a user with an initial password and tell them right away what the password is. So they will not get an email to set up authentication possibilities, but you can rather set a password right away. And the user is ready to authenticate basically with that new credentials. So that's it from our side about all the new features that we have included in the Zitadel version 3.
Thank you so much for watching our V3 deep dive. We'd love to hear your thoughts on our latest release in the comments. And if you're interested in joining our community to participate in more events like this, check out our bio below for more info on how to join, attend future events, and connect with others. Until next time.